talked about canvases, and we're going to introduce you to what we call a value stream canvas that we've been using for several years now. We're going to describe it, talk a little about the origins, the evolution of it, and some of the problems we've seen with it, and what we're doing now to improve upon it. The history of it is that after Mick Kirsten published his book on Project to Product in 2018, the publisher, IT Revolution, asked if we could produce a companion for that book. And so Carmen Diardo and I worked on this value stream canvas that came out 2018, late 2018. And the purpose of it really was to help people understand. We want them to visualize their problems, understand specifically where the handoffs are, how those handoffs get communicated, what are the modes of communication that occur with all the items that are flowing across the value stream. Trying to demonstrate how the importance of connectivity of the tools are, and really to provoke necessary conversations for change. This companion is free. It's licensed under Creative Commons. Anybody can use it. It's available. It's our gift to you. There's a link there. And also to add, it really stemmed from recognizing that the traditional value stream mapping that was occurring could be fairly expensive and costly in preparation and time. And that's why maybe it might only happen once a year. So we wanted to provide something that was quick, that was fast and easy for people to spin up quite rapidly. The exercise, the value stream canvas, offers two starting points. One from the upstream of the value stream, from a business request or feature request, and one from the other end, problems in production. And I found a lot of benefit, because I work with a lot of IT operations team, in starting in production, because that is the greatest risk to customers if production is down. And the simple question, there's really just two questions in this exercise. The first one is, how does work arrive? How does work arrive? Sometimes people have no idea how work arrives. Like, I don't know, it just shows up in JIRA, right? Or Helen has this idea, and she told Steve about it, and then Steve slacked us, and you're like, where's the ticket for it? I don't know, let's create one. And so the second question is, what happens next? But if we're starting in production, working backwards with a recent, it could have been an outage, but it could have been a feature release, but something that's quite memorable and still fresh in people's minds was helpful. This is an example from late 2018, maybe early 2019, large fintech, where we're all in the room and we're using a whiteboard. You can see that this is not a linear workflow here. This was a production outage and incident due to network capacity, where production's down, network issue, switch failure, and an incident gets created. So we just marked a box there up on the right. We're trying to identify how it was first communicated. Right? So somebody on pager duty gets called, and we identify the tool that it's in. So the type of artifact that it is and how it was communicated. And if there's not an artifact and it was just a phone call, then we just draw a picture of a telephone. Right? In this situation, the incident was mitigated. It was resolved fairly quickly, problem solved for the short term based on a hot fix. But what was the long-term fix? It was very somewhat convoluted, and there's a story here on the board about how it's moving across all kinds of different teams and meetings, and Jira Board 1 and Jira Board 2, and finance gets involved because we need to procure new switches to upgrade from 5 gigabytes to 10 gigabytes. Eventually, it goes through CAB, gets approved, and gets scheduled. During this process, everybody involved in the room had a role to play. It was quite engaging. People weren't afraid to voice their opinion. And the VP was in the room, and I watched their jaw drop, discovering what was necessary to just upgrade switches from 5 to 10 gigabytes, and also how long it took. Unbelievable. So it impacted, this exercise impacted their financial process. Second example here from a large telecom. This one done 2021, maybe 2022, online, remote, with an organization where not all the right people were on the call. Many of the folks on the call were quiet. The person who was identifying all the steps in the value stream was the program or product manager speaking on behalf of everybody else. So there were some missed steps. It didn't seem to be as engaging, and the outcomes weren't, I don't think, as valid or as desirable as they could have been. So several factors going on here between these two different examples. I don't think there's just one root cause. I think there were three things at a minimum going on here. One was the culture of the organization. In the first example, a relatively generative culture. Everybody engaged, saying, hey, that's not how it worked. We had to do this first. Right? In the second example, that wasn't happening. Nobody was questioning the manager who was speaking on behalf of everybody else. Secondly, it's always better in the room to have everybody there. We did a stand where you are exercise, and everybody could say what they did, where they were. We're online, it's remote, a lot of people don't have their camera on. Quite a challenge for us. Third one I just blanked out on. I'll come back to it when I remember that. But I just want to talk about what we do now and what we have done to change this exercise to make it more engaging for people and more relevant. So I'm going to hand it over to Chris.
Thanks, Dominica. Which one is the forward? Is it just that arrow?
Yeah, to the right.
All right. So when we thought about this exercise and we thought about kind of like what are we doing, we came up with this idea of a crime scene. So you're called. I mean, it's kind of funny that value to a client is a crime scene, but you're called into a company. Your job is to understand how does value make it to a customer. You're basically like a crime scene investigator, right? So when Dominica talked about some of the exercises that we've done before, a lot of times we start at the left, like we start with the demand into the system, and we ask what happens next, and we walk our way to the end. The problem with an approach like that is humans are notoriously optimistic, so you're gonna battle that, because the story that you're going to get, even if you have the right people in the room, is you're going to get kind of a weird average kind of answer that doesn't really reflect the highs or the lows. Kind of like what Krishna said yesterday, value flows at different speeds. You're not going to understand all the speeds from a discussion like that. And actually, Steve, I think this idea goes to you maybe a year ago. What if we started in production, but we started with a feature? So we started with some value that goes to a customer. And so we came up with this idea that I'm going to walk you through some steps that we would do to try to understand more about what's really happening. The one thing I'll say here is that because we're a software company, we start with measurement. If you're doing this manually as a practitioner and you don't have a tool where you're not actually measuring, you might have a different approach. But for us, because that's our business, we start with measurement. One of the things we've realized is that the data tells a different story than the people. And some people might say, well, that's because the data's not accurate. That's part of it, but that's not all of it. There's actually something different happening in the data than what the people say, and I think that's because of a variety of reasons. So this exercise here, this we would do maybe before we did the session. And step one, try to remember a recent delivery that you delivered to a client, something that gave the client value, working software in the hands of a customer, right? In this case, this is a feature that our team delivered. We like to think of this thing called a vessel of value or a vehicle of value. Sue there is I think the person who coined that word. There's a lot of things you do and there's a lot of things you track, but there's something that actually carries value. And so, like, what is actually carrying the value? So in this case, this team was using an Epic to carry value to customers. That was their means. So now that we've identified that, we ask a series of steps, a series of questions, and this is kind of the human side of the crime scene. Like who did what, when did they do it, this kind of thing. All right. So I can't actually read them, but I'm gonna step over here to see if I can read them better. So first thing to ask is what teams had to fix defects on this. So if it's already been delivered to a customer, likely there could be something that was wrong with it or something that didn't go well. So that's a question. In this case, the team that did the coding actually fixes the defects, so that was a simple answer. The next question is who approved the code to go live to customers? One of the reasons we asked this question
which he reiterated, but I think starting in production versus starting on the other side played a role.
It's a lot easier to walk back from production than it is to walk forward. It's a lot more deterministic. So then we ask who approves the code to go live to customers. One of the reasons we started to ask this question is because we find that work gets held in escrow a lot. So all this work is done, we put all this effort and this time in, and then there's some marketing group that says, oh, but we're not going to launch that till next quarter. And if you really want to understand your value and your flow of value to a customer, you have to consider that kind of stuff. So that's a question we ask. Who did the testing? Were there any platform teams impacted by this release? Who did the regression testing? Who actually does the security vulnerability work? That's an interesting question. A lot of times you get a lot of answers that, I don't know. Who did it? Does someone do it? Not often a very clear answer there. What teams or sub-teams had to make changes? So I want you to think of teams not just as external teams, like that you might have to work with, or your product team, but even think within your team. Are there skill set sort of sub-teams that exist, like a front end and a back end? People don't think about that a lot, and that's really where flow goes to die. When you start to see those things, that's the why. That's why things are slow. So you need to start exposing those kind of things. Who created the design? Who created the requirements? Who approved the release? Who created the business case? Who requested the feature? So if you answer these questions, you have a pretty good start on who to invite to your mapping session. So the next thing we do, because like I said, we're a software company, we want to track data from day one if we can. So we start to ask, what artifacts are tracking this? What are they? So I mentioned that in this case there was an epic that was carrying the value for this feature. And then there was 8 different stories. The way we think of stories is we think of them often be supporting the value, but they don't tend to carry value on their own. Some people say they do, but I think those reports are greatly exaggerated. When you really get into the data and you look at it, you find that generally there's more than one story to deliver value to a customer most of the time. So once you have the data, you can actually take that data from the systems and you can actually kind of draw out what actually happened. So in this case, it kind of looks like a Gantt chart, not meant to be a Gantt chart, but basically you had an epic that took 3 months, and you had these stories that were being sequenced one behind the other, and the orange stories are the back-end team. So you can actually find out who does the stories often, because a lot of times people label the stories. The blue stories are a front-end team, actually a team of 1, so there's only one front-end developer. So the point that I was trying to make with this is that if you want to improve flow, this is kind of what you have to improve. It's not like a state where work goes and waits. It's actually like it's in between the work where flow dies or waits. You'd have to start improving constraints, like the fact that we only have one front-end developer. The question isn't where are we inefficient. That's actually the wrong question, and that's a question a lot of people ask. The question is actually where should we invest? That's the question. Like, we're investing in things we shouldn't be, but where should we be investing? And in this case, maybe we should have another front-end developer. Maybe that's the best thing we could do to improve flow. Or maybe we should get rid of the sequence dependency between the back-end and the front-end work. Maybe there's something we could do. The question is, why can't this all happen at the same time?
This is an example of the necessary conversations in order to provoke change that happen when we're doing this exercise that actually influences the kind of changes that occur in ways of working or your process.
It's basically a sequencing issue. That's what we see with clients. It's about how do we sequence the work to get the most value out the door fastest. This is another example, same team. Because there's different speeds and different scenarios on teams, you can't just do one. You probably want to do a few. This is a case where there was an external team, the data platform team, that had a performance issue on the platform. And if you look at the flow, if it took, what does it say, 8 months? 3 months were just because of the platform team. So like how you need to go after the thing that takes the longest. So you need to start to see these kind of things if you want to, improve flow.
Q&A.
So here's our Slido. The way we wanted to do it is we wanted you to ask us the questions. So instead of us asking you, we want you to ask us.
And you can upvote other people's questions. So that way the question that's most relevant to the most people in the room will float to the top. So just go to slido.com. You probably already have this in your browser from the questions this morning. And type in your questions. You can type in anonymous if you like, or add your name if you wish. And then we just need to present it. Can you present it, Steve?
I can show you, folks. How do we present it? I have to pull up.
You have to go in the log. You have to log in.
Just do a new. Whoops. Nope. Hold on. Where did that go?
Ask a question while we're waiting.
Absolutely. Let me just get you a mic.
Thank you so much.
I know that I've drunk the Kool-Aid, so we can just get that out of the way. Now I'm going to talk. So I'll repeat. I'm aware that I've drunk the Kool-Aid, so I know that I'm a fan. But why? I don't understand why most companies wouldn't just do this. It doesn't take long. To me, it seems simple. So help me have some compassion or understanding. Why don't they?
Couple of different reasons in my experience. One is that it's something new and different, and as Stephen was talking about, how change is pretty difficult. They have their way and their exercises of working, and it can be seen as a waste of time. Or like, we've already done value stream mapping, like that didn't work. Or we've set up sometimes value stream canvas. I think it depends if it's push or pull. So if it's an organization with a generative culture and they're open to change, ripe for change, like Stephen was talking about at Shutterstock, they're open to trying something new ideas. They're more on the innovative and early adopter side. But if it's an organization that's resistant to change for whatever reason, somebody this morning mentioned a good point about resistance to change, then trying something new can be seen as, not in their empire. That's not the way they work. It takes the control maybe out of their hands. So I think that's one example that I've observed. Chris?
I think we're applying static approaches to a dynamic problem. So you probably try something and it might work for a little while, but then it stops working because the world changes or your org changes like all the time. So I think until we figure out a way to do this real time or dynamically, I think we'll always be maybe feeling dissatisfied.
All right, top question.
Yeah, I was just going to also say, is this working? Organizations are complex and dysfunctional and quite often very political, and things that might not be interpreted as like directly value producing like this, even though we know it's indirectly highly valuable, things that are not directly value producing are just sometimes difficult to kind of work through that political network to get the right buy-in, to get the right people in the room to do the thing. I'm curious to know which industry or which who you're representing. Are you in enterprise or are you?
I'm a consultant.
Yeah.
But I do come from industry long time.
Yeah, it hasn't got any better.
Stephen says we have time for about 2 more questions, so we'll take it from the top with the most voted up. From Anonymous, a lot of waiting happens on shared services. How would you bring them to the table and encourage to change? So for shared services, particularly platform teams, we like to do a product structure exercise. We call it Cooper's Coots, that shows and identifies external products, internal products, and then all the platform products that support all the other products, including business products, so that they can join the party, right? For many years, IT hasn't been invited to the table to meet with business people or their stakeholders. And so going through an exercise like this to identify that they have a role to play and inviting them to the party so that they can have a voice in an exercise like this, we've seen to be quite beneficial.
This is probably the place to invest for many organizations. So a lot of people measure the customer-facing type of work, and they want to. But then when you really dig into it, you see that there's a shared services that's touching a lot of other customer-facing, functions. So this is really the place that, of all places, this is the place you should be doing value stream management.
Last one is, where do you typically find the easy wins flow improvements? Easy wins and flow improvements. You just sort of mentioned giving attention to the shared services and platform teams. I would vote for self-service, capacity expansion for those individuals who have the knowledge and the expertise and they're slammed all the time. What can we take off of their plate so that flow can move faster through that bottleneck?
So I think Sue could tell you. By the way, Sue is like if you want to do value stream management, you need a champion, somebody at your company. She's the champion of all champions. So if you want to know what a champion looks like, it's right there. So easy wins can be something like, I changed the way of thinking about something. Like, it doesn't have to be, I changed a business outcome. So like, we honestly, one of the biggest wins we had was we just got them to rethink about what does it mean to commit to work. And realizing that there's a business commitment and then there's a sprint commitment, and they're not the same. That alone is a massive improvement, because a lot of things come out of that. So
I just want to say, because we work with these folks, and just getting that language proliferated inside the organization. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Just having that language begin to be adopted because of the exposure to the concept. A simple 3-word phrase, line of commitment. When we did this value stream canvas, we had to negotiate where do we make commitment to work, and that was a revelation. So yes, it's getting those aha moments along the way that begin the shift without being a massive slide into future state.
Amazing. Thank you, Dominica, Chris, and Stephen.